Hey everyone, welcome back to another recap podcast from SNXweave, where we give quick weekly recaps of news and important updates from the previous week from the Spartan Council and core contributors, as well as discuss what the Grants Council and ambassadors are up to, so let's get started. V2X is still being wrapped up, with a couple of SIPs currently in audit. First is SIP 252 to allow the liquidation of escrowed SNX, and then there's SIP 258 to incorporate directionality in the pricing of atomic swaps. 258 is the top priority, and it's expected to be on mainnet this week. The council also discussed some SCCPs. SCCP 218, which will update the ETH wrapper parameters, has been modified. It will now raise the cap by 2,500 ETH instead of 2,000, and the fee will be updated to 50 basis points. This is being done due to the recent premiums seen on the SUSD peg, and the debt increase incurred by stakers due to short exposure to ETH. SCCP 301 was proposed by Terabellus to set the Spartan Council's minimum active member setting to N-4, where N represents the council's current seat count. This means that should the situation call for it, a council member can be dismissed without forcing an election that could revert any dismissal. The SCCP also further defines the conditions allowing a meta-governance vote by specifying that a unanimous decision among non-dismissed council members meets the necessary criteria. Terabellus said he proposed this SCCP as a result of SCCP 300 not passing, and Ale suggested it be proposed as a full SIP instead. The council further discussed the question of how many members it should take to pass a meta-governance proposal. KSET brought up the fact that any PDAO members also sitting on the Spartan Council breaks the decentralization and separation of power, and therefore opens another possible attack vector. There was some consensus that it doesn't necessarily need to be unanimous, and some agreement that maybe N-2 would be an acceptable compromise. Tara also brought up the issues surrounding the delay in C ratio increases between L1 and L2. There's a technical limitation that prevents a single action on two separate networks from being approved in one transaction. As a result, the C ratio on L1 stayed at 350% a bit longer. It turns out there's actually no advantage, but there is still some agreement that the issue should be resolved so that something like this doesn't happen in the future. After the Spartan Council meeting, there were also several SIPs that were discussed, so let's briefly review them. The first was SIP 255 to burn fees instead of distributing them. This SIP was presented by DB and proposes burning fees collected by the fee pool instead of allowing stakers to claim the fees and have those fees transferred to them. This will have the effect of reducing users' debt overall, and in theory they will be able to mint more at a later date. He explained that the SIP was written to address concerns that one-way flow of fees in response to current network imbalances would not be equitable. Burning the fees is a more effective way to distribute fees to all stakers. Fief brought up that he would still want to somehow display how much SUSD benefit stakers were getting as a result of this improvement, but DB said that would require significant changes for the UI to be able to track these distributions. DB said one of the biggest concerns with this proposal is that stakers with lower C ratios would receive a larger portion of the burned fees. This may create an undesirable incentive for users to keep C ratios low if inflationary rewards drop significantly. Fief responded by saying the real solution to that problem is to make liquidations punitive enough that it's not worth it for users to be that close. The next presentation was SIP 259 for overflow in issuer when the rate stale period variable is greater than the current Unix timestamp. DB also presented this SIP, explaining that there's a bug in issuer that causes subtraction overflow when the rate stale period variable setting is set greater than the current timestamp. To prevent issues when running tests, this SIP will fix the code so that it will allow any timestamp if the rate stale period is greater than the current timestamp. This isn't a significant security risk, but it's a code improvement that protects the protocol from a scenario where the rate stale period variable is set to a time in the past. The next presentation was for rate limiting, also presented by DB. This SIP proposes reducing the impact of a possible security breach in the bridge by implementing a simple rate limiting functionality on all transfers processed by the bridge. Essentially, a system for limiting the amount of transfers a bridge can process. The rate limiter will only allow a certain number of transfers over a given time period. and the rate limit period and amount usable will be an SCCP configurable parameter. For non-attacker transfers, this would effectively put a limit on how much SUSD could be transferred in a single transaction. The Spartan Council will be reviewing some more data in the SIP to set more accurate limits. And Ollie also added that this adds complexity to the V2X scope unnecessarily, which is limiting V3 resources. The next presentation was SIP 252 to create perp markets for Monero and Doge. Burt proposed this SIP, which will offer Monero perp and Doge perp futures markets. The SIP originally included Ethereum Classic markets as well, but the council asked that it be removed based on majority feedback. In Grants Council updates, the team had a call with some of the Quenta guys last week to discuss the margin matching initiative. They discussed some of the incentives that Quenta is planning, with a focus on bigger traders generating $1 million in notional volume or more. They want to see users really taking advantage of the value that zero slippage adds to a trading experience. The team will be vetting users for high quality traders who have done heavy volume on other exchanges as well, and Quenta will be submitting a formal grant request for voting. The council also discussed a few other ongoing initiatives, including first, flash loans. UI work is still in progress and the team is waiting for a follow-up from Jade. Second, explainer videos. Gabriel has published his explainer video, so make sure to check it out in our blog post. Third, integrations. ZeroX had originally asked for a grant to integrate, but it looks like they've moved forward with their integration without the grant. Paraswap is also working on an integration and also moving forward without a grant. And finally, the hero stats page. The 300 is currently running a task for review and feedback. Lastly, in Ambassador Council updates, the team has a Spartan Space scheduled for today at 3 p.m. with Quenta, so be sure to tune in for a great call. The ambassadors also have several more spaces lined up for the coming weeks. Also, the uni proposal that the ambassadors submitted has been executed. The 1 basis point fee tier is now live on Optimism. This fee tier is ideal for short tail stablecoins and peg tokens and should benefit all Optimism protocols with liquidity and LP incentives. The team is also coordinating with the Grants Council to get their help in creating the Ambassador Council website. They hope to maintain the same synthetics design aesthetic across all the websites, so it will likely be the same team that built and manages the grant site. And that's it for today's updates. Be sure to check out our weekly recap blog post, share this podcast link, and let us know what you think and what you'd like to hear more about from SNXweave. Thanks for listening.